Hello everyone, I'm Suranjan Malik. Again, today I'm going to talk about a poet, but today I'm going to talk about an Indian poet, and her name is Arundhati Subramaniam. Arundhati is an Indian poet, a modern Indian poet who is an award-winning author and poet of 13 books of poetries and prose. She has also worked as an editor of various important modern anthologies. She has an anthology called Eating God, an anthology of Bhakti poetry. She has also co-edited an anthology of poetries of love with Jerry Pinto. Her book, When God is a Traveler, received Sahitya Academy in 2020 and it was published in 2014, I think. And her recent two books of poetries are When God is a Traveler and Love Without a Story. Her recent book, Women Who Were Only Themselves, is much acclaimed and praised by not only by readers but also critics. And this book is about four women bhaktas who are not in the limelight of our social media or our modern day world, who are secluded, who live in a secluded place and like to be there. And Arundhati, through four essays, talks about her experiences of encounters with these four women who are mystic and in the same way bhaktas. And and like previous, I mean uh, the tradition of bhakti poetry in India, these modern bhaktas, they do not write poetry, but they sing in praise of their God in their own way, silently, in a secluded place, not among our modern day lives. Her one important book, Eating God, is a book of an anthology actually of bhakti poetry, and and you can easily understand Arundhati's inclination or interest in bhakti poetry and mystic poetries. But when I first encountered Arundhati's poetries, I mean when I came across Arundhati's poetry, it was through the book When God is a Traveler, which was, as I said, was recipient of Sahitya Academy of India, but was also shortlisted for T.S. Eliot Prize. And in this book, then I did not understand. Uh, Arundhati express her inclination through metaphors towards bhakti and mystic poetries. But when I first read those poems, I flowed. I mean, I was drowned in lyricality, in musicality, in metaphors. I first read Urduti in terms of metaphors, in terms of poetry, in terms of beauty of poetry. I love Urduti. Uh, I mean, among the modern Indian poets, I admire Arundhati so much. I can even read Arundhati's poetries all day without tiring. I love her so much. Her poetry has kind of lyricality that cannot be found in modern. I mean, that rarely can be, that are rare in modern Indian poet and poetries. That's why I admire her. And if you read her poems, you will almost forget about anything. Like Arundhati juggles with words. She uses words like no other modern poet of India does. And Arundhati, that's why a much acclaimed, a famous poet of India, and she is day by day getting famous among readers and among critics. Before reading her some of the poetries, I must tell you that the concept of home, for the reason I am interested in Arundhati, the concept of home or homeland is very much unique in Arundhati. Like for Arundhati, home is a concept that can be found in anywhere. Like Salman Rushdie, if you read Salman Rushdie's imaginary homeland, I mean, Arundhati's notion in a kind of way almost similar. Arundhati imagines a kind of identity that is not stigmatized, not polarized, not straitjacketed or created by previous generation or parents or orthodox society. She advocates a kind of identity or personal identity that is unique of one's own, that can be created and in the same way can be broken in any time. That's why in her poetry, again and again, the metaphor of cloth, metaphor of sari appears, and she has also poetry which are on her grandparents. She has also poems on home, on homeland, and interestingly, when Arundhati was Charles Wallace Fellow at residing when she was in Scotland, she found a land that is that almost is similar to her childhood painting of a dreamland. That's why Arundhati in a way finds home in a foreign land, and that is very much unique in Arundhati, and that is why I very much love and admire her. Let me uh, read some of her poems, not all but two or three. And if you are a lover of poetry, you are going to enjoy. But if you are not, I am requesting you leave this video at once. This video is not for all. Arundhati, if I am talking about Arundhati, it is only in terms of poetry. Arundhati, in spite of her in spite of her proses, her essays, and in many things, she is primarily a poet. And she has acknowledged it many times, even if not through or in an interview, but through poetry. And let me read some of her poetries or poems, and then it will be clarified to you. Let me read the first poem through her anthology, When God is a Traveler, and this poem is from the first section. The name of this poem is Leapfrog, and this has a beautiful epigraph. And this epigraph is said by none other than Sadhguru, the modern mystic of India. And the epigraph reads, anyone who has sufficient knowledge nurses ambitions of writing a scripture. The poem reads, not scripture, no, but grant me the gasp of bridged synapse, the lightning alignment of marrow, mind, and blood that allows words to spring from the cusp of breath song, from a place radiant with bird flight and river green, not the certainty of stone, but grant me the quiet logic of rain, of love, of the simple calendars of my childhood, of saints o'erlaid by overripe lemons. Grant me the fire's tenderness of watching word slither into word, into the miraculous algae of language, untamed by doubt or gravity, words careening, diving, swimming, unforming, wilder than snowstorms in Antarctica, wetter than days in Cherrapunji, alighting on paper only for a moment, tenuous, breathing, amphibious, before leaping to some place the voice is still learning to reach. Not scripture, no, not scripture, but a tadpole among the stars, unafraid to plunge deeper if it must, only if it must, into transit. You can see, Sadhguru says anyone who has power of over vocabulary or over language has has an ambition to write scripture. But Arundhati says she has no ambition to write scripture, but she has an ambition to write poetry that allows the readers, the even the poet to depart. Arundhati always advocates a third kind of identity that is not like stone. Like here she says, uh, not the certainty of stone. You see, she always has a disbelief over orthodoxies, over orthodox old notions. She always, that's why, advocates a third kind of a unique identity of the self that is not straitjacketed, polarized, or or or, ready made, that can be made and remade. That is the identity, that is who I live from. You can live from this place to that through poetry. And Arundhati, she knows the importance and the beauty of poetry that allows you, like kids in Nightingale. Similarly, Arundhati wants to depart whenever she wants through poetry. I mean, it's beautiful. Let me read another poem. And this poem is the first poem of the eight poems. And the title of this series of poems is Eight Poems for Shakuntala. And Arundhati, in one of her interviews, said that this poem series, eight poems for Shakuntala, is the backbone. I mean, the central of this book, when God is a traveler. And if you read this book, I think you will understand. I'm not going to reveal everything. I mean, why I do not understand why people do not read poetry nowadays. Arundhati is a kind of poet that will keep you bound to poetry, keep you encouraged to read poetry and return to poetry again. So let me read the first poem of the Sakuntala poems. The first poem reads, "So here you are, just another mixed up kid, daughter of a sage and celestial sex worker, clueless, like the rest of us, about your address, hermitage or castle, earth or sky, here or hereafter. What did you expect? What could you be? But halfway, forever interim. What else but goddamn human?" We all know the identity of Sakuntala. Sakuntala is a daughter of a sage and an apsara, but Arundhati here says a celestial sex worker. And as we all know, the myth of Sakuntala, Sakuntala is not of earth, not of, I mean, heaven or godly. She is human. She is rejected by her husband. She, I mean, even by the hermitage of Kanuba. And she is always in a kind of journey, always finding identity, and that is fascinates Arundhati very much. The travel, the longing to, I mean, the longing to find something, always in a journey that interests Arundhati very much. And that is the reason behind these eight poems. Here, Sakuntala is imagined by Subramaniam as 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 any human of this world, like even we are from our birth to our death. What we are just traveling, and just like Sakuntala, we are finding our identity, and in between we do many things. That is why Subramaniam is very much interested in travel. Even in many of her interviews, again and again, she says that she is fascinated by travels. She has an anthology called Pilgrims India, where she has discussed, I mean, not discussed, she has anthologized various writings of pilgrimages through and around India. She is fascinated by pilgrimages, the search. I mean, the journey fascinates her very much. In one of her interviews, she says that not the full stops, but the commas, the searching that interests her, and that cannot tire her. Let me read another poem from this book, A Shoebox Reminisce, where she says, "I renounced safe long time ago. Choose chose bagginess, endless recessivity. But there are days when the longing returns, and I cannot abide the sterile cynicism of anti-couples club, the smug peddlers of Unisol Advaita. I know it means the saga of twofold shoes all over again. The grubby leather onions, tales of childhood, prejudice, toe jam, politics, laces in a perpetual snarl of knots, footprints. But some days I am idolater enough to want it again, that old serried otherness. She says that we all, like the rebels, anywhere, always desires a kind of, always try to break the old notions, old identities. They always want to depart. But do you not think when they depart and create a kind of identity, a kind of place that is also cliche? I mean, that also gets old, and that's why she says she sometimes desire to return to the old shoebox, the short, the congested place, the old notions. And Arundhati, who has inclination towards bhakti or mystic poetry, and you all know mystics or bhaktas leave home to in search of a life that is secluded from the rest of the world, the worldly desires. And this is a metaphor actually. Returning to the old shoebox is actually a metaphor. Let me read another poem, and this is called Bhakti with some adulteration. If you were coffee, I wouldn't live my life in a coffee shop, getting my fix on your beans. Public lust isn't my thing. Allow me some deluxe delusions. Allow me to uncork you in the middle of days that rattle like coke cans, blow through alleys like old Sunday tabloids, so I can steal a whiff no more of your crazy liquor, decant into my hip flask, settle down in my pocket, stay illicit. In this poetry, through metaphors of love and illicit love relationship, she actually, it is actually a metaphor. She I mean, here she talks of the god, the personal god, the bhaktas worships or adores in their searching of true meaning. You can find in Mirabai's bhakti songs, or even Kabir's songs. They praise, like Kabir praise Allah Rama together. And here Undhati, almost like an iconoclast, tries to break the old notions. And as it is illicit, I mean, that is not, I mean, common way. That's why that attracts her. And if it was a common way, if it were a common way, that might not attracted her. That is what Subramaniam says. Now let me read some interesting poems from her book Love Without a Story. And it has also an epigraph that reads, the tongue is alone and tethered in its mouth. It is said by John Berger. The poem reads, the man in front of me is reading a balance sheet. He is smiling, his gaze seeming between columns, effortlessly bilingual. And though a little drunk on the liquor of profit, I like to think he is not immune to the sharp beauty of integers, simmering with their own inner life. And I wonder if he feels the way I do sometimes around words, waiting for them to lead me past the shudder of taproot, past the inkiness of groundwater, to those places where all tongues meet, calculus, Persian, Kokborok, flamenco. The tongue sparrows know, the accountants and the palm trees at the far end of holiday photographs. Your tongue, mine, the kiss that knows from where the first song sprang, forested and densely plural, the kiss that knows no separation. This is the desire of Arundhati, to create a kind of language, a kind of place through poetry that can be, I mean, achieved by the even by the reader, and similarly that can be transgressed and that can be overtaken by any reader, uh, through which, like a leapfrog, the reader can always depart, accept yet depart. That is the desire of Subramaniam, and she tries to create a kind of tongue, I mean a kind of language that is spoken by all. That is the desire of Subramaniam. Let me read another poem, and this poem series called The Strange Thing About Love. The strange thing about love is that it melts you into an amateur, never again a professional even on the subject of yourself. The second poem. The strange thing about love is that you disagree wildly, and then figure it's wiser to dance. The strange thing about love is that it evicts you from the land of echoes you thought was home and leads you to friends sitting under the stars in ancient bewilderment. This poem, the love is the love is what these love refers. Love without a story. The love of this title refers. It is bhakti. What the bhaktas does, they renounce home to search or in search of their God. They praise their God in their own way. They like Mirabai, like Rishi Aurobindo, as Aurobindo does in their poetry. Let me end this video by reading one of her important poem, and the poem I love very much. Poems matter. It was snowberry perhaps, or habit, to want perforation, to choose cotton, for instance, with its coarse asymmetries, over polyester, or unctuous rayon. But this, I suppose, is what we were looking for all along. This weave that dares to embrace air, the husk of linen, these frayed edges, these places where thought runs, threadbare, where colors bleed into something vastly blue like sky, these tatters at peace, almost with the great outrage of not being around. It's taken time, it's taken a long time to understand. Poems matter because they have holes. Poems matter because they have holes through which you can depart, through which you can always create an identity which is concrete, yet you can depart, always live, transcend, always love to return, always you can always remember and create in new ways, and that interests Subramaniam very much. And thank you. And I'm not going to stretch this video further. It is already much longer than I expected. Thank you for staying so long in this video.